Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to our fourth and final Maid Cafe. Let's meet the ethics of halal. So I'm your chairperson for tonight, Shamsa Ali. I'd like to thank EYMN once again for hosting us, for being so kind to Maid, always exceeded our expectations in whatever we've tried to do. So thank you all for coming. I think that our topic tonight is particularly interesting. I think Muslims generally take a lot of interest in meat, whether it's our love for eating meat, whether it's talking about it. I mean, if you look at some of the statistics, 51% of lamb produced in the UK is produced according to halal standards. Muslims consume 20% of the UK's meat, and we make up less than 5% of the country's population. So practically, we're kind of meat obsessed, just to make a sweeping generalization. But I think it's not just the Muslims. It's an obsession that, as humanity, we've taken on in the past half century, where our meat consumption has gone up 5 times the amount that it was before that. And actually, the World Watch Institute, the UN, now talk about how meat consumption in agriculture is on par with fossil fuel in terms of how it damages the environment. So increasingly, we're seeing this demand, which is continuously increasing, and we're not being able to meet that, or being able to meet the standards that we would like to see. So the debate tonight is contextualized in a Muslim context, in light of all the things that we've been seeing in the news recently. The Sonia touched upon the Pizza Express scandal, Denmark banning religious slaughter for kosher and halal meat. We've seen organic farms increasingly appear. We're talking about the differences between certification bodies, and in fact we're taking it a little bit further than that and talking about animal welfare. No problem. And we're talking about the concept of tayyib. So almost in all places in the Quran where halal is mentioned. Yes, before I do that, apologies that we were late, and there's a hashtag if you would like to tweet tonight. I missed that. It's Let's Meet, so please do post your comments and your thoughts and questions on there. Yes, so tayyib. So it's mentioned alongside halal in the Quran, but not many of us are familiar with the concept. Admittedly, I wasn't either a year and a half ago, I'd say. So I'd like to just quote something. It's a verse from the Quran that talks about this in that context, and kind of frame the discussion from different angles so that we can take it past the way that we're used to looking at it. So the verse says, "O you people, eat from the earth what is halal, i.e. lawful, and eat what is tayyib, i.e. wholesome, or pure or good, and follow not the footsteps of shaitan, for verily he is an open enemy to you." This is Surah Baqarah, verse 168. So I'd just like to end on that and feed into some kind of food for thought. I will introduce our panelists, after which we will let them open with their opening remarks. So starting from the right, we have Dr. Lutfi Redwan from Willowbrook Farm. Dr. Redwan was born and educated in the UK. He has a degree in geography and Arabic from London University SOAS. He subsequently completed a PhD at Oxford. He went on to lecture at Oxford as well, undertaking research and consultancy in the Middle East thereafter and West Africa for various public agencies, including the FAO, the UNDP. Private agriculture development is also something that he went into after that, specializing in dry land reforestation and irrigated horticulture production. More recently, his focus has shifted from the global scale to the local scale, where he sold his house and moved to buy a 43-acre site north of Oxford, where he established Willowbrook Organic Farm, the first halal organic farm in the UK. So next we have Maulana Yunus Dudwala from the HMC, the Halal Monitoring Committee? Yes. Maulana Yunus is the chairman. He's currently the chaplain in bereavement at the bereavement services of Bart's Hospital NHS Trust. He's also served at the mosque as an imam in Seven Kings in East Ham. He's also worked as a full-time imam at the high security Belmarsh prison, originally from Blackburn and a graduate of Darul Uloom, Bury and Al-Azhar University, Cairo. Next we have Awal Fisaini from HFA. He is the certification manager at the Halal Food Authority. He obtained his first degree in agriculture from Cape Coast University in 2005. He then went on to complete his MSc in meat science and technology from Bristol in 2012. He then joined HFA in January, so coming on to 2 years now, and was an auditor before going on to his current position. And finally, we have Shazia Salim from iEAT Foods. Shazia is the founder of iEAT Foods, which is the UK's first brand of ethical halal ready-prepared meals. She launched in Sainsbury's and Tesco earlier this year. She now has a range of 17 products, over 60 stores. It is one of the largest ready meal brand launches in the UK history. iEAT will be in over 200 stores before their first birthday and have just announced a partnership with HMC. They will also be looking to launch a charitable organisation early next year. So thank you so much to the panellists for being here tonight. I know we're all really excited to see the diversity of the panel and to hear their thoughts on the issue. So before I delay any further, let's pass over to them. We'll start from our right, and we'd just like them to spend 5 minutes giving their opening remarks on the topic.
Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum. I feel a little bit awkward here because I think I'm to a certain extent slightly critical, but I can only say things as I see them and from my own perspective in the light of what we've done. I don't want to sound holier than thou in any respect. I think we all do what we have to do, but I do like to be direct and clear about what I believe, I think. The question was, what does animal welfare and ethics in the halal meat industry mean? Sadly, it means very little, I think. We follow the profit motive rather than the profit motive with a PH. As we just heard, we consume 3 times more meat as a community than the rest of this country. So we're the real culprits when you look at the impact of meat production. Most of the halal chicken produced in England is based on an inbred, docile Frankenstein-type bird known as Ross cobs. These are reared with no reference to animal welfare, but solely based on economics. This Ross cob breed, which is 99.999% of all the halal chicken we produce, would die if it were let outdoors. It wouldn't know what to do with itself. It's poorly feathered, has no natural instincts, it doesn't know how to move. They grow so fast that their weight quickly outgrows the bones, which if they're left too long will start to crack under the weight of the body. They're reared indoors exclusively. This applies to all the halal meat that you're buying in the UK, pretty much. In batches, 20,000 up to 100,000 birds per industrial shed is not uncommon. They're kept continually in the dark to prevent normal activity. It also prevents them from pecking and cannibalizing each other due to boredom and overcrowding. Unhygienic conditions, sitting in their own feces for much of their own life, leads to hock burns on their legs. It leads to blemishes on the chest due to the ammonia, which is effectively a light acid bath that they sit in. Infection and disease would run through the houses, except for the fact that they're daily drip-fed antibiotics throughout their life. That cocktail of chemicals is part of the issue of obesity, possibly, that we're seeing an epidemic of amongst the Muslim community, because that passes into us. It also acts as a growth promoter in the chicken. So if you're told that chickens don't have growth promoters, it's not true. They're daily drip-fed antibiotics, which are growth promoters. But despite this, a large number still die of contagion, and daily, through these sheds, pickers are sent to take out the dead carcasses, which are often stripped clean by the other birds, who will peck them. And then they're dumped in skips, and more will die during transportation. Due to the economic pressures to provide the cheap meat, this is a common occurrence in the halal industry. One simple fact, just to focus the mind: no mass-produced halal chicken in the UK ever sees the light of day in its short life. It doesn't even see light because the lights are dimmed. Can that really be acceptable or halal? I think we have to ask ourselves that fundamental question. It's dishonest in a way to possibly use the term tayyib if that meat is coming from those conditions, which is the case, I'm sorry to say, with all the halal meat produced in the UK. And to me, it's a gross misunderstanding of halal. So a more pertinent question is, what does animal welfare and ethics mean in Islam? And if you'll permit me just a few moments to talk about that. Ultimately, we all come from one shared origin. It's a simple spiritual truth, but also a logical scientific fact. Allah says in the Quran, do the unbelievers not realize that the heavens and the earth were one before we exploded them into existence? So in that cosmic sense, there's no separation, no us and them. However, we have a special station. Allah informs us that He it is who made us his stewards on earth. And if we dispense that role well, we do it for the benefit of our own soul. And we are then the best of creation, ahsan taqweem. And if we abuse that nature, then we're lower than the animals. We're asfal as-safilin. So this role of steward, protection or abuse of the world, which is in our hands, is the ultimate purpose of our creation. So it's no small thing. Care for the environment is actually fundamental to the creation of man, the purpose of man. The Prophet said, whosoever is kind to the creatures of God is kind to himself. For each charity shown to a living creature there is a reward. And there is no man who kills even a sparrow or anything smaller without cause, but God will question him about it. Each one of us is individually responsible for our actions. On the Day of Judgment, we can't say the HFA, the HMC, iEAT, or even Dr. Radwan told us that this was acceptable. You need to think for yourselves. On the way here on Radio 4, I always pick up something on the way on Radio 4. I heard someone, a quote which I loved. It was, on Spaceship Earth, there are no passengers. We're all crew. It's up to all of us to do something. We can't just let the world pass us by. Think for yourselves. Halal isn't just a word. Halal means acceptable. Haram means unacceptable. It's not just rules and prescriptions to blindly follow words and rituals and just trust a stamp that says halal. In fact, the Prophet said religion is community or social action. It's what you do. It's not what you say, and it's not a set of rules and regulations. We need to engage our brain. We need to take responsibility. We all know it's happening. We all know the horror stories about indoor conditions, animal welfare issues, yet we have a disconnect and still go down to Pizza Hut and buy halal pizzas. In the modern world, we're distanced more and more from responsibility for our actions, and this is something we try and stress on the farmers. You've got to take responsibility. Khilafah doesn't mean anything to do with ISIS in Iraq. It means taking responsibility, being God's steward on earth. The industrial process has removed us as consumers from the production process. We would all obviously find it abhorrent to personally abuse child labour to make clothes for us, or personally to pollute rivers and the environment to make our furniture and our gadgets, or to torture and maltreat animals to provide meat for us. But every one of us does this every day in one shape or form, indirectly. As Muslims, we need to ask ourselves if we can continue to just passively allow these things to happen around us, or wake up to the realities and take responsibility for our actions. And if you want a definition of halal, then look to the Quran. Wherever the word halal is used, it is tied to the word tayyib, natural, pure. And in one verse, it's even defined as such. They ask you, Allah says, they ask you, what is halal, acceptable to eat? Say all that is tayyibat, all that is pure and natural, is halal for you. So perhaps I can end up by turning the question back to all of us as individuals and say it's more important to ask this question: what does animal welfare and ethics mean to you? Do any of us here really think that the Prophet, peace be upon him, would condone industrial farming practices? Even the term is abhorrent. Mass slaughter, we all know the horror stories. Or would he instead, of course, support farming methods which care for animal welfare, care for the conservation of natural resources, and as a result of that, for developing strong community ties and linkages between producers, and to quote the oft-used phrase, from fork to plate? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll move on to Maulana Yunus.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, Ya ayyuhar rusulu kulu min at-tayyibati wa'amalu salihah. And it's a message which is to the messengers. And he says, O messengers, eat that which is tayyib. And the commentators mention that tayyib here means halal. Kulu min Ya ayyuhar rusulu kulu min at-tayyibati wa'amalu salihah, and then do good actions. And the commentators of the Quran very clearly mention in this verse that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving a message that the food that we eat has an effect on our behavior. And that is why both have been brought together. Eat good, eat halal, and then do good actions. And the term you are what you eat is not only in terms of those who are obese, but in terms of our spirituality. It makes a huge difference whether you eat that which is halal or that which is not halal. And in terms of the ethics of halal, I think what Dr. Lutfi mentioned is very important. I think in an ideal world, if we are to eat properly, then we would eat organic. We would eat natural, naturally fed, naturally produced. However, the reality which HMC was faced with when we started around 10, 12 years ago is that we live in an industrialized world where Muslims are consuming huge amounts of food. Whether it's halal or not halal, whether it's produced halal or not halal is a concern, but the reality was that even though it was being produced as non-halal, it was being labeled as halal. And I think from our perspective, yes, the ideal would be what Dr. Ridwan, Dr. Lutfi does himself, and he's not only speaks about it, but he does it with action, and you can only commend what he is doing. But in reality, the diet, the food, the nutrition in this world is dictated by wealth, is dictated by corporate industries, is dictated by production speed, is dictated by profit and not by the Prophet. And that is why, unfortunately, we have to try and make do with what we have, which is affecting the masses. And HMC looked at, in terms of halal, what is happening within the halal shops today. And what we found is that many of the shops that were claiming that they were selling halal, when we went back to the producers and when we went back to the slaughterhouses, let alone tayyib, let's move tayyib to one side for a second, even the produce was not even halal. The produce was not even halal. The slaughter methods were not halal. And if I was given a choice that either you change the whole industry and make it tayyib and halal, or make it at least halal, then that was a choice that HMC was faced with about 10, 12 years ago, and it made a choice that at least make it halal so that the people are eating halal. Let the minimum requirements be done. Because yes, tayyib is recommended, but anyone who does not eat tayyib will not be eating non-halal. But if somebody is eating non-halal, then it's non-halal and it's haram. And that was the choice that HMC made. So yes, the ideal would be, in terms of the ethics of halal, is that the animal should be looked after according to natural means, the natural way it's supposed to be living, etc., etc. However, the reality is that we are faced with imports from Brazil, we are faced with imports from Argentina, we are faced with imports from Europe, from Belgium, from Holland, from all over the world, Saudi Arabia, all the Middle East countries. They're not even producing the meat themselves. They are importing from Brazil, they are importing from Europe, they are importing from South America, they are importing from Australia, New Zealand, etc. And therefore, what is more important currently is making sure that the animal is halal, and that is why HMC set out some standards to make sure that they had inspectors in every slaughterhouse to ensure that the process of halal was being met, and then they have inspectors and monitors throughout the shops visiting regularly to ensure that the produce that they have promised to sell to the consumer is not being cheated, but they are selling what they have promised to sell. So ideally, yes, but Muslims, you and I, majority here are Muslims, and Muslims are very price conscious. They are very, very price conscious. In fact, HMC, when it came into the market, their product, because they were using inspectors, placing inspectors in the slaughterhouse and using inspectors to look at the shops regularly, their product went up maybe 50 pence or 10 pence more than the other halal. And people started complaining to HMC that you've made the products too expensive. And if we were to tell them today that from now on you do not eat from any halal shops, you go and buy organic, then do we think in reality, in the real world that we live in, that everyone is going to buy a chicken for £18 every single week? I don't think so. So I think ideally I would only eat what Dr. Lutfi produces, but in the real world we have to try and cater for the needs of the Muslim community, and that is what HMC is trying to achieve.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Okay.
Yep.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Awal, and I'm representing Halal Food Authority. When I got the invitation to come here, I was told we will be speaking about animal welfare. I was first of all shocked to hear that we'll be speaking about animal welfare in halal, because I've been with HFA for just under 2 years now, and for 2 years, wherever I go in a meeting with Muslims, if they want to ask you something, a question concerning animal welfare, it's always about stunning. So I always say, well, is that the only thing we know about animal welfare? Or is that the only point we disagree about animal welfare in halal or in Islam? But then if you look, when I was told we talking about animal welfare, I say, okay, that's a good idea. Because we'll have to look from the farm gate, not even from the farm gate, from rearing of the animals, like Dr. Lutfi is doing. To be frank with you, if we want to follow it properly, then it's going to be very hard to find halal product in the market. If we want to follow the prophetic method, as people always try to say, it's going to be very hard to find halal food in the market, because production from feeding, birds are normally fed ad lib. They are given food all the time to feed. As to whether it's welfare friendly, I don't know. Is it welfare friendly? Is that how the Prophet used to take care of his animals? I don't know. But there is a welfare concern there, feeding animals ad lib. Putting thousands of animals in a small space to rear them for the halal market. You and I consume them. Is it halal? I don't think so. Like Dr. Lutfi said, there are hot burns everywhere. There are birds who cannot even stand on their feet because their genetics does not support the level of feeding, the level of growth hormones that are used to make them grow within weeks. So if we are saying prophetic, you and I are only concentrating on the slaughter, but it's more to do with the rearing than just the slaughter. The slaughter takes only seconds. When you slaughter a sheep, it probably takes 20 seconds for it to lose sensitivity or to die. Now, so many people concentrate on that. They just leave the most important ones. Catching of birds. When you catching birds, there are a lot of welfare compromise there. Transport of birds. A lot. If you go to a slaughterhouse and look at the percentage dead on arrival, you'll be shocked. Most of it is due to congestive heart failure. They are so clamped together, you can't even inspect them. They are clamped in crates. And to be frank with you, anyone who has been to a bird slaughterhouse will tell you that antemortem inspection is just not is useless in terms of birds. The OV or the official veterinarian only goes there to have a look at the external. There are birds inside there, we don't look at them. And we say that is halal. There is a law we need to think about rather than just the slaughter. But the fact is, if we have to concentrate on the whole chain of halal, then you and I may not be able to buy halal. I'm not sure how much Dr. Lutfi is selling one chicken or one lamb, but it's going to be very expensive for us. But the reality is we should go that way. But we are not. We are not going that way because you and I want to buy cheap products. Is it halal? I don't want to declare whether it's halal or it's haram because I'm not up to that level to declare that. But I'm just sharing the idea with you. And the truth is, if I ask anyone here to define what animal welfare is in Islam, we will get hundreds of definitions. Because animal welfare is more, sometimes people say it's subjective. You give me one definition, everyone here has got different definitions of animal welfare. So we have to be careful. And there are so many people who call me and say HFA is not slaughtering in accordance with what the Prophet did. Then I ask them, did the Prophet shackle any bird before slaughter? No, he didn't. I don't know how many of you have been to slaughterhouses. Whether it's stand slaughterhouse or non-stand, the birds are capsided upside down. That is a welfare compromise. But you and I will not look at that. We look at whether it's stand or not. Let's look at the whole process to see whether they are really halal or not. But I don't want to go that route, because people will keep telling me stunning is not prophetic. But mass transporting birds for 12 hours is prophetic. Shackling birds, turning them around is prophetic. Slaughtering thousands of birds within an hour is prophetic. I don't think the Prophet slaughtered millions of birds in a day. No. So you and I should desist from saying these guys are halal and these guys are haram. You are no one, I'm no one to declare something as haram when it's not. I think we are crossing the line. We should not, if you are not 100% certain, don't say it's haram when it's not. That is just the idea what I want to share with you. So we should be very cautious in saying this is haram, this is halal. Because if you go down the chain, to be honest with you, so many people will say it's haram. Transport is haram. How many? It's pathetic. We need to educate ourselves. We need to educate the consumers. And we who are certified should come together to educate the consumer. We shouldn't tell the consumer something is haram when it's not. Because the Quran is above all of us. And if the Quran says this is halal and you say it's haram, on the day of judgment you answer for that. So that's just my view on that.
No, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to Shazia.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. So I apologise in advance. I've been ill with flu for the last week, so if my voice goes at any point, just put your hand up at the back, especially if you can't hear me. So I've been scribbling away here because what I wanted to say at the beginning changed dramatically as the speeches have gone on. So if it's a little bit all over the place, just forgive me, but try and bear with me and I'll try and make sense. So I'm Shaz, I'm from iEAT Foods. We founded the business 9-10 months ago now. And it's been 8 years in the making. And over those 8 years, I've had this precise debate in my head over and over and over and over again, you know, like, and the more suppliers we met, the more farms we went to, the more certification bodies we went to, this was the debate. And I don't know if any of you bought our packaging, or bought our food, but on the back of the packaging is my face with a little blurb about the product and then my signature. So my face is literally signing off every single product. And that's a huge responsibility and a huge burden to kind of have to accept. Because on the day of judgment, if I've given you something and I've told you that it's halal, and it's not halal or it's not the right thing, then the sin and the onus is on me, right? And so having that on your shoulders is quite a big thing. And over these 8 years, it's like, you know what, is a shepherd's pie really worth it? Like, right, surely I should make my own shepherd's pie without taking on this responsibility as well. But we did it, and one of the conversations, the sort of pivotal conversations that really spurred that on was a conversation I had with a retailer, and I won't say who it was, a retailer about 3 years ago, who I was explaining to them what they meant and what the British Muslim consumer wanted. Not the first generation who kind of came here and were really happy to get halal. I'm talking about the ones who are growing up here, who are looking around at all of the other welfare stories that non-Muslims get told, and were wondering why we didn't get told the same thing, or why we weren't assured of the same thing. So I was explaining this to the retailer, and the retailer said, I don't think Muslims cared about that kind of stuff. Point blank. And I had to argue with him for about 30 minutes as to why Muslims, A, do care, and B, should care. I take the point that Dr. Lutfi said. I think it's in an ideal world, organic and free range is the best of what we should be eating. But to Sheikh Yunus's point, we live in an age where there's mass consumption going on, and there's 3 million Muslims in the UK. We have gone from 0 products to 60 stores in a matter of months because of the demand for this stuff. And I have it as a responsibility on myself to make sure that we work within the framework and the structures that we're given to make sure that our food is as ethical as possibly can be. Now that comes at a cost, but we actually take the hit on a lot of that cost and we don't pass it on to the consumer. Because I think it's the right thing to do. We get asked all the time, would you like to take this chicken supply from Eastern Europe? Would you like to take this beef supply from Brazil? And we say no at every single opportunity, because the way that it stands at the minute, we have a relationship with the farmers and the suppliers that we use. I've seen the way they work, and I trust in what they do to make sure that they give us a good quality product where the animals have been looked after as much as possible. I remember going to an abattoir. I went to 2 abattoirs in one day. They both had BRC certification. They both had Halal certification. All grade A, like across the board. But actually when you go there and you kind of see the way that the animals are being handled, you just kind of have to go, you know what, I'm not a scholar, I'm not a learned person in this, but as a human being, that to me doesn't feel right. And we actually walked away even though they were cheaper. So for me, with iEAT, all we can do is try and do our best within the industry that we're in. And it's not just about, the day aspect for me isn't just about animal welfare, it's about things like packaging, it's about how you conduct the business, it's about how you deal with your suppliers, and even a really basic thing like telling the truth. I've heard some real horror stories amongst the halal industry where the biggest corruptors and the biggest people who cut corners are the Muslims. And that's for me is a real shame. It's something that I really want to try and turn around and change the perception of what it's like to be doing with business with a Muslim. Before I wrap up, I just want to touch on the point that was mentioned at the introduction with Pizza Express, because it leads me to this point that Sheikh Yunus mentioned, which was, you are what you eat. I don't think we ask the question enough of who is giving us to eat, because that's really where a lot of this stuff falls down. Because if you, I've seen it a lot. Actually, having iEAT launch, I've been working in the industry a lot, and I've started to see some of the things that are now changing, where non-Muslim companies are seeing Muslims as a way to earn money, and are moving in on the industry and selling them a product that's labelled halal, and thinking that Muslims will buy it because it's got the Arabic letters on it. And unfortunately, that is what's happening, without any question as to who's actually certified as halal and who's behind the company. And that's a real shame here, because, for example, Pizza Express bought in halal chicken because it was cheap. I won't go into the logistics of why it was cheap, but they bought it in because it was cheap. It's got nothing to do with trying to help Muslims or trying to provide halal meat to Muslims. Nothing to do with it at all. Otherwise, they would have said so in a much more audible manner. What they did was bring it in because it was cheaper, say that it was halal on their website, I think, and then that was it. And then as soon as it came out in the press, I drove past our Pizza Express in Luton, which is where I live, and you couldn't walk around the block for the amount of Muslims that were trying to get in and get a table. But I don't know how many of those people actually said, hang on, who's certifying this as halal? And what are the practices that happen in the kitchen to ensure that it stays halal, right? Because there's cross-contamination issues that go all along the way. But we're not thinking that far ahead. All we're going is, oh, someone's told me it's halal, that's amazing, that's great. But if that person's not Muslim, or if there isn't a credible certification body that signs that off, then really it's no skin off their nose to go around telling us anything is halal. And that's the thing that I really kind of want to leave you with, is making sure that you ask the question about who is giving you this food. Because take it from me, having been in the industry, I've seen a lot of non-Muslims now who are starting very much to wake up to the fact that there's a Muslim pound, and that they can sell a lot of products by putting a halal logo on something. And we as Muslims need to take responsibility for our own day of judgment, because if we buy a product that's knowingly given to us by someone that's not Muslim, I think we all have to start asking the question as to whether it's halal, where it's come from, how it's been reared, all those kind of things. And just lastly, to finish off, I wanted to actually just say a very big thank you to Ernst & Young for asking me to be on the panel. I told someone that I was coming here today, and I said that I was sharing a panel with Willowbrook Farm, Dr. from Willowbrook Farm, and they said, you're going to get a slating. It's like, yeah, I pretty much am. And I could have taken it easier. I could have called up and said, look, I've not been ill this last week. I don't think I could do it. But, we need to have these conversations. We need to have these conversations. We need to be more aware. And as Dr. Lutfi was speaking, it's made me go, right, I'm probably not going to sleep tonight, because I always need to ask the question about whether what we're doing is right. And I, as a responsible person within the organisation, needs to make sure that we're working with our suppliers to do the best that we possibly can. And if we can't, then we need to come out of it. And I will do that, and I urge all of you to do the same thing as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think we'll continue. So the format of the rest of the evening will go like this. We will pose some questions to the panel that were put forward from people beforehand. After that, we will open to an open Q&A, in which I will ask you all to put forth your questions, hopefully keep them short and concise. And we'll take them in threes, and we'll go like that. So, okay, and shall start with Shazia, as she finished last. So one of the most potent questions that was sort of put forward was that with the halal industry increasing in such a rapid pace, it's becoming a huge market, not in the UK but also internationally. So ready meals kind of seem like the natural progression or kind of way to take that forward. But how, as an organisation that places an emphasis on tayyib meat as well, do you think that can be maintained if it were to be taken to a larger scale? Do you think that we'd keep the same standards, or do you think that we would risk facing the same problems we have currently, where standards are not being regulated or not being met? How do you feel about that?
As an organisation, I think we're strong believers in sustainable growth. So as an organisation, we would only ever grow at the speed that we felt comfortable and that we felt that the supply could keep up with us at, which is why we've had the other two supermarkets on our door to launch with them months ago, and we haven't. We want to do this thing where we take our time, we grow sustainably, and like I said, that the pressure on the suppliers isn't too much. From an industry perspective, however, you're right. It's growing at a very, very fast pace, and the more, like I said, there's much bigger non-Muslim organisations looking to move in on this that are starting to now take the speed of growth to be much faster than anything that a humble little organisation could ever think to achieve. Ultimately, it comes down to whether those values and standards are consumer driven. As long as they are consumer driven, you will have companies and organisations that look to promote and champion those values as much as possible within that organisation, but it's got to come from the consumers. That's the argument that we had, like I described in that first conversation with a retailer a few years ago, where I was putting my neck on the line and saying, look, this is coming from the consumers. The amount of research that we've done, this is what consumers really care about, and I'm right. Events like this, wouldn't have existed 10 years ago, but it's existing now, and I hope they continues because people are starting to really care about this stuff. But ultimately, it's down to consumer voice. We need to hear from you guys that this is something that you care about, and you need to tell the other organisations that are doing halal that that's something that you care about, so that we can all work together in order to improve the standards and improve the output that comes out of the industry. Inshallah.
Inshallah. No, that's a completely valid point. I think your colleague on the left mentioned that, again, it's about education, about raising awareness among consumers and about the demand that we have and how that shapes and dictates the kind of meat that we receive. And actually that goes on nicely to the next question I was going to ask Milana, was that you talked about the spiritual element of consuming meat and the effect that has on your spirituality. In the current kind of context in which we're consuming meat, how do you think that affects our Muslim communities, and how do you think, how long can we go on like that? What are the risks that we face?
I think it's a very important question, and when Shazia was speaking about who is giving our food, there is also a spiritual aspect to that. And the more we consume, the more dangerous it becomes in terms of our behavior. And if we look at our youngsters' behavior, when we are growing up, when children are growing up, as parents, we are very careful that we don't give them sugar, too much sugar, because their behavior changes. We are very careful in other things that we feed them. Don't give them too much salt. But when it comes to meat, then chicken and chips or a takeaway every weekend is farad, more than salah. Yeah? And this is really dangerous. I've been with HMC for over 10 years. And I think out of any of you, I think I must have eaten out less than any of you put together. That I don't eat out. And one of the sheikhs once, he came to my colleague's house, and he wasn't expecting the sheikh to arrive so quickly, so his wife was in the middle of cooking food and it was nearly cooked, but he thought, let me go and order something from outside. And sheikh said, stop, what are you doing? He said, I'm just ordering something extra because the food is just being prepared. He said, no, wait. I'd rather eat from a woman who performs salah and says Bismillah before preparing her food than to eat something from outside. In fact, there are fatwas out there which ulama have written in some, I'm not agreeing with them, but some scholars went to this length that they used to say that if the food has been slaughtered by a Muslim with Bismillah, and then it's put on the transportation, but it's transported by a non-Muslim, then it is not allowed for you to eat it. Some scholars have said that. I'm not saying I agree with this, but this is how much they felt that the food affects your spirituality. Food affects your spirituality. And that is why we have to drill into our youngsters from a young age that they have to eat less meat. The consumption has to go down. Has to go down. Because the way we are going, it's as if it's farad to eat chicken. And yes, we were going back to when I was growing up, maybe it was one chicken a week or one chicken every 2 weeks. Yeah? But now, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted us wealth, it doesn't mean that we have to consume it in this particular way. And we have to be very careful. And I think it's affecting our children already. It's affecting their behavior. It's affecting the way our Muslim community thinks. It's affecting the way that they behave. Everything is being driven by the food that we eat because it goes into your bloodstream. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He didn't mention, "O you who believe, eat halal or eat tayyib and then do good actions." Allah, when He says it in the Quran, He says, "Ya ayyuhar rusul," or messengers. He's telling the messengers that eat good food, eat the correct food, eat the halal food, and then do good actions. So if He's telling the messengers that this food affects you, then just imagine how it affects us, mere mortals.
No, thank you very much. That's a lot to take in. And I think it's something that we don't think about a lot, which is the spiritual dimension of the food that we eat. And there's a lot of evidence, indeed, about how it does affect us, not just from Islam, but also from a scientific perspective, from every perspective. I think a really pertinent question coming of that would be to Dr. Lutfi about how, if we were to take organic farms as a model, realistically, if we're speaking a little bit practically about the demand in the UK, it's perhaps one thing that we can say, let's reduce our meat consumption. But even if we were to say that, is it realistic to say that if we replicated the model of organic farms and went away from factory farming, that we could meet the current demand, or that it's a realistic way of going forward?
Absolutely. I think it is. In a sense, I can't really accept Shazia's argument that somehow supply is consumer-driven and demand is consumer-driven. We must meet that to a certain extent. People want this change, but only so far. To define tayyib as nice packaging, sustainable packaging, but serve indoor-reared chicken that never sees the light of day, that I think all the panelists said, effectively, we were all sort of, saying we're never going to touch halal meat from the presentations we had at the beginning, I think. We heard it from the horses' mouths. We all said how bad it is. Yet we're now backtracking a little bit and saying, well, you can only push them so far. Yes, I'm a realist, and I'll accept that we can only push people so far, and that's why I threw it back to you. It's up to you to change things, because the supply will be there for you if you demand it. But do your homework. You're eating 3 times as much. Cut down 3 times as much. And then cut it even more. Eat once a week. There's absolutely no reason why tomorrow, Brother Awal, couldn't go directly to free-range farms in the UK and source all your chicken there, charge our consumers 3 times as much, and sell that to them. Or at least offer the option. How many halal butchers don't even offer the option? They only have to go and buy it, but they're all tied into this nasty trade with unscrupulous Muslim rearers of chicken. I won't call them farmers. It's actually an insult, really, to say you visit farmers. These are people who rear in industrial units and churn out this chicken, and you all buy it. Go to your halal butcher and say, stop it. Go and find some free-range chicken and buy it. It doesn't have to be a Muslim who rears it, but it can go to our halal abattoirs and be killed in, as I know from HMC, with good standards of trying to achieve good standards. I know that we're on that route. And I know, and from hearing what you said, I'm really pleased with what you said. You know, you're recognising these faults and problems. We'll try and deal with them. But yes, we can cut back on our meat, and yes, we can find free-range meat very, very quickly. But just to pick up on the final point, the spirituality, it's really important. It's not just eating meat, but look at the culture of eating meat, and look at the spirituality that kills. And look at the real spirituality of growing your own vegetables with your family, nurturing that sort of love of nature, cooking proper food as a family, eating well, bringing our customers, as we do, onto our farm, letting them connect with the animals, see the animals, come at lambing time, really connect with nature and find that unity, that wahdat al-wujud, which we recognise all of us come from the same source. Everything comes from the same source. To reconnect with that spirituality. So, all these things are tied together. And, okay, yes, I'm a little bit on the outside here, maybe pushing, standing in front of the steamroller, and I respect those who are sort of trying to actually just redirect the steamroller a little bit. But, I think really we have to be clear. It is possible to cut down. It is possible to source almost immediately free-range chicken from very good producers in this country and take it to our abattoirs. Instead, I find my neighbouring farmers often say to me that they know about Eid, they love Eid. And I wondered why. Because they can sell their toothless old lambs, they can get rid of any old rubbish because the Muslims will buy anything at Eid time. Astaghfirullah, We're the laughing stock of the community, and we should be at the forefront. Because our religion offers a great set of principles, a great spirituality connected to the earth. Yet where are we with that? We're following, sadly, the profit motive. And with the greatest respect, I understand where you are and where you're coming from in doing that. But I think we need to be clear. And the ball's in your court. You have to be the change.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So my last question from the chair, and then we'll open it up to the audience, is to Awal about if we take on the points of our panel about reducing meat consumption, about looking at what halal and tayyib means, do you think that it's something, from your perspective, that would be contradictory to not just the industry, but any business that's involved with the industry? Because if we're cutting back on meat consumption, we are at a loss, essentially, for the industry. And I think, especially with the increasing market internationally, as Shazia mentioned earlier, a lot of non-Muslims are producing halal meat just because it's more profitable. I think there was a report in which the president of HFA, in fact, mentioned that 80%, it's likely that 80% of the meat produced in the UK is produced by non-Muslims. And that was a shocking statistic. How do you think that we can advocate, or if we wanted to advocate, consumers reducing their meat consumption, and how that cannot go contradictory to the halal meat industry?
Well, as my bio was read from the beginning, I did a master's degree in meat science from Bristol University. And funny enough, when you hear meat science and technology, you feel these are students or lecturers or academic trying to promote meat consumption or meat, trying to increase the meat trade. But there was a module during the course on healthy living style, where there was emphasis on a reduction in meat consumption. Because if you just consume anything you come across, you realize that it's not good for you in the first place. So we may try to reduce consumption if we are preaching on reducing consumption. I think it is going to be good in terms of health. It's going to be good for us in terms of health, and also it will contribute a lot in reducing the mass production that we are very concerned about. If, for instance, you decide, as Dr. Ludwig said, to eat meat once a week, you can decide to go for the healthy option, go organic or go free range, which is more expensive, but you know you are not consuming a lot. So I think everybody needs to get involved. Every Muslim, not just halal certification bodies or imams, you and I have to get involved in preaching the advantages of reducing meat. The halal industry is contributing massively to the economy, to the UK economy. Let's forget about that. Let's concentrate on our own health, reduce food, forget about this profitability and all that. If you preach on healthy lifestyle, we will be able to reduce meat consumption, which will be good for us. And I'm sure everyone will support it. Though it's a main part of our diet, but reducing it is not gonna cause us any harm, to be frank with you. I met a very respectable imam today, and he told me for 7 months he hasn't eaten meat. And he feels better than ever. So I think if we can get people spreading this message, we will be able to reduce meat consumption, and we will be able to go for the better options, to go to the halal, the prophetic methods we've been preaching about. If you eat less, you eat the quality ones, so that we don't eat the ones at the lower level of the food chain. They don't dump it on the halal market for us to eat. I think that's what we all have to get involved in.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I think we'll start with the question of vegetarianism. So I want to direct this to Dr. Lutfi, but I'd like to leave it open to the panelists in case anyone wants to comment. But as Muslims, I guess essentially what the audience member was saying was that, is it a political statement we should be making in the context that we're living in? Should we be going vegetarian to counteract the negative effects of our mass consumption?
Yeah, there's a very, very strong argument for that. Obviously, it's a shame as a meat producer to have to promote that line, maybe, but you know, it's true, of course. We do eat far too much meat. We have this debate at home quite regularly over the amount of meat we consume, and we do try very hard to incorporate a vegetarian diet, to have days which are purely vegetarian. One thing we found on the farm, and it ties into the last question as well about the cost, we eat a lot more vegetables with our food, and we eat a lot more. My wife's from an Asian background, where generally cooking vegetables means just boiling and boiling, you know, in the salad until there's no real flavour or nutrient left in the vegetable. We do a lot more stir-frying things now, so we're enjoying eating vegetables crisp and healthy and with all the nutrients. And that's a good byproduct of what we do, and it's something that we could all access. Whether it's organic or at least ethically produced, I think you can stretch to that if you cook creatively. A lot of our customers are not very well off. We sell a lot of, for example, chicken carcasses, which is just the carcass of the chicken, very cheaply. People then make a really good stock and soup, add a bit of carrots, other vegetables, and have an incredibly nutritious, healthy chicken soup for pennies. So I think there's a strong argument. Essentially, the early Muslim community were vegetarians with the occasional meat. And we can certainly turn that around and reincorporate that sort of attitude into our life.
And in terms of the education that was mentioned, how should we be talking to the next generation about this?
Well, certainly in your case, come to the farm. We do open days, we do have school visits. I think it's really useful to look at things holistically. Islam has always been a holistic religion. I recently was looking at a collection of translations of what were known as Kutub al-Filaha, which are agricultural compendiums from Muslim Spain from the Middle Ages. And these detailed basically organic principles of soil and water management, of composting, farming systems, essentially a very advanced understanding of the integrated nature of farming. Modern industrial farming separates everything, just like the modern world likes to separate all processes. So if you're going to teach about welfare and these sort of issues, you've got to look at an integrated way of producing food, where animals and crops are produced together in a more sort of mixed farming system. So that's maybe one way you could do it. That's something we certainly do on the farm. We take it a step further. We look at things like where we produce our energy. We have solar panels on the farm. We have a wind turbine. We've built a mud house on the farm which we're living in. So we actually take that whole responsibility thing as far as possible and say we have compost toilets to try and teach people that come to the farm that it's not just what you eat. You've got to be responsible for. You've got to be responsible for your waste. You've got to be responsible for the energy to heat yourself. All of this comes together.
Okay, thank you. Malala Yunus, I wanted to, so this is a question that's posed from the audience about stunning, and I know that HMC do not allow stunning before slaughter, and I guess in the context that we're living in with the environment, with the economic pressures, the technological advances, how do we keep up in the industry like that? And essentially what the individual was saying was that by way of the same comparison, do we then say stunning is a reality? Is that something we accept?
Yeah, I think the questioner asked the question that if you're going to accept industrialized processes, then why are you not accepting stunning?
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, there's a contradiction. I think what we based our opinion on right from the outset is there are certain rules within Islam in terms of what makes an animal halal and what makes an animal haram. One of the laws mentions that the animal has to be alive at the time of slaughter. Now, stunning can keep an animal alive according to some. For us, it's too risky. It might make the animal dead before the slaughter. And therefore, if the animal dies before the slaughter, then the animal is haram. It's non-halal. And therefore, we could not compromise on that issue. So, for example, if somebody says, well, we've got a slaughterhouse, but the animal is not facing Qibla, we go back to the text and say, if an animal is not facing Qibla, does that make the animal haram? No, it doesn't. It's a recommendation, it's a sunnah, but it's not a condition for an animal to become halal. And therefore, we can compromise on that just to make sure that the rest of the needs that make the animal halal are done. So yes, we try and make the animal face Qibla, and we try and do this and we try and do this, but anything that compromises the halalness of the animal or risks the halalness of the animal, we have not compromised on. So that's the answer. So it might seem contradiction, but when there is something which might make the animal haram, we have tried to avoid it.
And have you been approached by any animal rights groups?
We have discussed with animal rights groups, and there's a discussion which goes on regularly. And if you look at the reality of stunning was introduced in the early part of the 20th century, not because of animal welfare. And you can look this up. Stunning was introduced for the safety of the slaughterman. Stunning was introduced for the safety of the slaughterman, not for animal welfare. Because they felt that the animal will kick out, and therefore we need to make sure that the slaughterman is safe. Then slowly the argument changed because of the mass production. You want the animals to be stunned so that they can be slaughtered much more quickly. So whether it's in reality an animal welfare tool or not, that is still up for debate. So we can debate that until, sorry, pardon the pun, but the cows come home. Yeah, sorry.
Can I just
Thank
comment
you.
on that?
Yes, I was about to turn to you on it.
Yeah. Just to comment on the stunning. As Maulana said, if you stun an animal and it's not dead, it's not haram. If you stun an animal and it's not dead, it's not haram. HMC has taken a very cautious approach to stay on a safer line. But I have been involved, I've actually participated in some stunning researches. And I can assure you that not all stunning methods are consistent with halal. There are stunning methods that are called killing methods. If you gas stun an animal, you are likely to kill it. We do not go near gas stunning. If you use a captive bolt to stun cattle, it's not reversible. If you stun it and you do not slaughter, it will die, or it may die. Now, we have, if you look at our website, we have a set of parameters that has been tested to ensure that they are reversible. When I say reversible, when you stun the animal and you do not slaughter it for maybe 2 minutes, it will revive. It will get back. I was in Brazil in September. I tested 235 birds. They were stunned. I removed them from the shackle, put them on the floor. They all got up. That is called recovery trial. It's illegal in the UK. In Brazil, you can do it. The Home Office regard it as a demonstration, not as science, if academics are not involved in it. We believe if you stun an animal head only, you are targeting the brain of the animal. You are switching the brain of the animal from normal to what is called epileptiform. Epileptiform has been tested by medics to show that it's not consistent with consciousness. If you put the brain of an animal into epilepsy and you slaughter it, it does not feel pain. That has been related to humans. If you put me into epilepsy and you slaughter me, I wouldn't feel pain. That is the background behind it. So what we do is we have tested some parameters and we are very, very sure that those parameters will not kill. But we also agree that if you look at the parameters set out in EC Regulation 1099/2009, which is welfare of animal at the time of killing, 2013, the parameters, not all of them are consistent with halal slaughter. There are some, if you use those parameters to slaughter and to stun an animal, they will die. I was in Brazil in in Barcelona in January. We used 600 hertz of frequency against 200 milliamps of current. The animals died. So we said, we are not accepting this. Though it's in the EU regulation, we cannot accept it because it will kill the animal. If you are familiar with electricity, if you go above 1,000 hertz, science has shown, our own brother Anil, a Turkish Muslim, was part of the research that carried out. They tested up to 800 hertz and showed that 800 hertz did not kill. But what they said was, once you go about 800 hertz of frequency, it's not effective. But it supports recovery. So I'm happy Maulana has said, he's made his point clear. If the animal is alive after stunning, it will be very wrong for anybody to declare it as haram. It's not. If it's alive, no one, unless you've got your own Quran, you've got your own hadith, you've made somewhere. You cannot. And it's wrong for a Muslim to say something is haram when it's halal. So that's what I said from the start. We have to be very careful in declaring things haram when it's not. The HMC does not declare it as haram, but they have taken a very cautious approach, which is good in a way to protect themselves. But we have done science. We have taken part in research, and we are very confident. We've put in our hands in the Holy Quran to say, look, we are happy to approve this as halal. And if you are not sure, the parameters are on our website. You can go to any slaughterhouse, stand the bird, remove it, put it down. If it dies, come back to me and say, look, you guys are liars. The parameters are there. You can try it yourself. So it's not that we are hiding anything. We are very open. Try them. If they kill animals, come back to me, and we will stop stunning. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, we're just going to finish with the two questions that we have, and we'll open up again. So realistically, from an industry perspective,
Yeah.
If we were saying that, okay, the demand is high, the reality is factory farms, what kind of realistic standards do you think that we can reach in terms of animal welfare before starting on slaughter?
Well, to be very, very frank with you, if so long as we practice factory farming, animal welfare will be compromised. There is no doubt about that. They don't have space. They don't have the chance to express their natural behavior. If anybody here has seen birds before, if you've read poultry before, they like to perch, they like to sunbathe. If you keep them in factory, they cannot sunbathe. They can't, because they don't have access to sand. I know enriched system has been introduced, but it does not support natural behavior. So we cannot satisfy animal welfare in production so long as we stay in factory farming. So not until you and I move away from factory farming, but we can't, because we want cheap items. So let's all join Dr. Lutfi in supporting his practice. If you want to ensure 100% halal.
Sorry, there is that option of sourcing free-range chicken from hosts of other producers across the country.
Well, I mentioned your name because you're here.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to corner the market, but you can. It is available. It would cost more, and you'd have to pass that directly on to the consumers.
Okay. No, thank you for that. Shazia, just to get your insight and input on this, in terms of the standards that we're talking about, what do you see as a realistic vision? Or I mean, the question that was directed to you from the audience was how do you feel about all of this in terms of for me being halal, but I think more appropriately talking about, what kind of standards do we want to be moving towards?
Mm-hmm. Well, the question was, do I, as a fan of iEAT foods, consider my food to be halal? The answer to that's yes. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here doing what I do and trying to grow my business. I have to be the person that says that I'm happy with this product and I'm happy with the practices and processes that we've put in place in order for it to be halal. And I'm not a scholar, so we've talked at length with the HMC, with the European Halal Development Agency, with many scholars about what we do in the industry and what we do as a business, and making sure that as far as the definition of halal stands, that we're fulfilling the criteria which is needed for that definition to be fulfilled. And we've now got HMC on board in order to certify our meal. So yes, I do believe our stuff's halal. Tayyib, however, is less black and white. The definition of halal is legal or permissible, and by its definition, then it's quite a black or white thing. But even in being black or white, you can see some of the debate that's gone on between these two brothers here about something that's quite basic, but even within halal there's debate. Tayyib and the definition of tayyib and wholesome and ethical and pure and natural is a much more sort of graded spectrum, I guess. And at one end you've got Dr. Lutfi who does the purest, most amazing thing, and don't get me wrong, I absolutely support what he does. And if I could have a halal iEAT organic range that was supported by the consumers, I would absolutely I would love to do it. But there is a spectrum in tayyib, and what we try to do as a business is not play anywhere near down this end, because that is where you get your 12 chicken wings for 50 pence at a fried chicken shop. And actually we're very much trying to push towards that top half, but we're trying to do it within the constraints that we have, which is difficult. But I'd rather be part of it and try and push for better, and try and push our suppliers to be better, and try and work within the industry to improve the standards that are out there, than try and take the cheaper option, which is what some of our other guys do.
Okay. So Shazi, would you like to start? I think your question was why HMC over HFA?
Thanks for that. No, I mean, listen. This is.
You want me to swap chairs?
No, I mean, listen. You've actually kind of answered the question for me in that I have to go to sleep at night, and it's difficult enough as it is. And what the HMC offer, and I hope you kind of said this yourself, what the HMC offer is a clearer path away from the grey area. It's without any doubt, without any kind of question, that this is the way that is halal. I'm not saying that what the HFA does is not halal at all. But for me, it was let's let's try and stay away from the grey area as much as possible, and let's try and get me to sleep at night in an easier fashion. And going with the HMC, the trust and the loyalty that they have is undeniable. But actually, from a business perspective, the level of integrity that I've seen from their staff, the level that they absolutely care about every single point on that journey, I've just never come across anything like it. And for me, from a spiritual level, from a legal level, from a business and customer service level, it's just something that is completely unrivaled, and is something that if you're going in today's day and age, where there are so many questions around what is halal, what isn't halal, is this the right thing, is that not the right thing, and I've got, like I said, I'm taking on the burden here by making the iEAT foods to make sure that they are halal. For me, it was like, you know what, let's just stay clear. Let's just stay clear conscience. This is definitely the way forward, and that's what we've done. And our meat has always been from the HMC abattoirs, always, right from the very beginning. It's just that very recently we've managed to work out a way that the entire meal gets HMC certified. But we take that level of integrity with everything we do. I don't know if you've heard me speak before. You might have heard me speak about even things like vinegar. Vinegar appears in quite a few ready meals. White wine vinegar, spirit vinegar. And there are many scholars, I'm not sure what the HMC position is on it, but there are many scholars that say, look, it's fine. It's changed its chemical properties, it's fine. There was one scholar who spoke to me and said that if the and gave me a hadith to back it up, which was if the intention behind making the vinegar was to make alcohol, then that product is tainted regardless of whether it changes properties or not. That one person telling me that was enough for me to go, you know what, oh my God, let's just take it out. And that is where my integrity lies with our product, is I want to be able to know that what I'm giving people is halal, and I take that very, very seriously. So if there's a risk of it not being halal, even if it costs the business a massive amount of money, then we'll do it. Because for me, this business has never been driven about profit. It's been driven to set up a foundation in honour of Khadija, and the good that that foundation then goes on to do is tainted if the money that it supports it isn't halal, right? So that's why I take it as seriously as I do. Was there another question as well?
Yes, the other question was about vegetarianism. So
Oh yes.
is there a big Muslim market for vegetarian ready meals?
You know what? It's funny. You're not the first person to have asked. None of our dishes are vegetarian. They've all got meat in them. And that was because when we started up this business, the kind of the USP, the unique selling point that we have, is that we make halal ready meals that don't exist elsewhere. If we started to do vegetarian dishes now, at this point in time, we wouldn't be able to compete with the Corns and the Linda McCartneys that are out there, because they're much bigger organisations that have huge economies of scale. Having said that, there's a brand in the US called Saffron Road, who are about 10 years before iEAT, basically, they're 10 years further down the line, that they do halal ready meals. Their brand is now so big, and the loyalty towards that brand and the ethics that are driven by their brand is so huge that they now can do a vegetarian dish or a fish dish, and Muslims will pay the extra 50 cents or $1 to get that because they support what that brand does. And for me, that's the ambition for iEAT, is to get to the point where we're doing such good things in the community and we're trying our best to do what's right ethically, that eventually we could do things like that and Muslims will still support us. But at the minute, it just doesn't work out, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next question is for HMC and HFA. Can we bring you guys together on a halal and tayyib monitoring committee? We talked a lot about how tayyib is really hard to kind of define, and definitely the context that we're in, it's a challenge. But are we saying that tayyib is impossible? Are we saying that factory farming is inevitable? What are we saying? And where do we want to be in the future? Who would like to start? We'll start with HFA.
Yep. Well, it's not impossible to produce our food in accordance with tayyib. If we do put in the effort, we will come to the realization of that goal. If you look at the animal welfare guys, they will tell you assessment of animal welfare, blah, blah, blah. They'll tell you 5 welfare freedoms. If you look at the 5 welfare freedoms and you speak to any imam or anyone who is versed with tayyib or who is versed with the religion, whatever they will mention you will realize that the 5 freedoms were actually derived from the teachings of Islam. They will tell you the animal should be allowed to express natural behavior. That's what Tayyib says. The animal should be free from hunger, disease, and thirst, which is what the religion says. So if we follow what the religion says in our farming systems, we may be able to achieve the realization. As to whether we can achieve that in factory farming, that is a big question. I'm not sure about that. It might be hard to achieve that, because, as I said from the beginning, if you consider factory farming, the welfare of the animal is compromised from feeding till it gets to the lairage. So there will be a lot of changes we will need to make to the whole farming system, from husbandry through transport to the farm, to the slaughterhouse, to be able to meet Tayyib, to be frank with you. But I think the excuse we keep giving is pragmatization or to support mass production, and that's when stunning also comes in. If we are supporting mass production and allowing thousands of animals to be transported through cramped condition for hours through transport, then we should. It does make sense to look at stunning as also a mass production technique. If we are accepting all that, if you want to produce thousands of animals in a very cramped condition, transport them for hours without even water or food, and you say, oh, I'll do that part, but for stunning, which is also for mass production, I'll get rid of that. So I'm going to forget about the rest and concentrate on stunning. Let's close our eye to that one and just concentrate on stunning. That doesn't make sense. If we are doing that, we have to look at the whole process. And it's achievable, but it's going to be a hard job to do.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think the question is whether it's possible or not for HMC to become a HMC certification for Halal and Tayyib. I think in terms of the Muslim community, in general, you're talking about over 2 million, 2.5 million, 3 million. I think there needs to be a lot of education before we get to there. And therefore, it's not impossible, but it's improbable, currently. Currently, yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So would we use our position to try and move that debate forward? I think we should be using that. But in reality, HMC is a charity, and it doesn't have the resources to have that education field at the moment. It's something that we strive for, but in reality, as Shazia was mentioning, in terms of our concentration, it's been on making sure the integrity is not lost within HMC, and therefore we concentrate on making sure there's inspectors present at all times of production. So we don't do any production where there's no inspector. We go and visit the shops regularly, 3 times a week, 4 times a week. Whoever has a certificate will make sure that they are visited regularly. So all these different aspects is being constant. So that's why our overheads are now over 150, because of that responsibility that we hold. So because of concentrating on that, I think there's something missing here. But hopefully, slowly as we grow and we are able to get some surplus which we can put away for education, I think that's the right place to go to, especially.
Okay, that's really interesting. I think we'll close up the questions. We're just about to sum up, so we'll ask the panelists for their final thoughts. I wanted to put forward 2 kind of questions that come out of the audience, have come out of your presentations, about how can you work together in the industry to ensure better standards, more unity, consistency, and secondly, what would you tell the consumers? What would you recommend to head towards a more ethical meat industry? Can we start from our right? Start with Dr. Lutfi.
Well, it's been useful for me sitting here and listening, particularly, I like your honesty. I mean, you couldn't have defended my position better. And I think it's to your credit that you admit it. I mean, to a certain extent, it reminds me, I had this discussion with my son before I came here. We were talking about the principles of the 5 pillars of Islam. What differentiates us from a believer and a non-believer is those who reject those pillars. Not necessarily that you do them. You might not do your prayer, but if you reject prayer, then you put yourself outside the pale of what Islam is. To a certain extent, this is the issue we've got here. The Quran talks of halal and tayyib together, quite clearly. We're all aware that the two are tied together. Brother Awal was very, very clear on essentially how our meat is produced, and I think it's difficult for us to escape the conclusion. It's not right. It's not right. As long as we know it's not right in our hearts, we have to then be pragmatic and deal with what's happening. And that's where I think we can easily work together. I think, you know, what HMC are doing, what HFA are doing, we do need to have this dialogue. We do need to find a way forward. We should have the basic understanding that I think we've reached, that, you know, it's a messy business. But you have to be on board with us. We have to move in a direction together. There are things that can be changed. I might be at the forefront and others might be pulling the rest behind. You know, I think they're both important parts. You can't have a train without all the carriages. So yes, I think there's obviously scope for cooperation. I do hate being in the position of a sort of preacher saying that what we do is great. I've never felt that, and I enjoy what I do. So, but I think, you know, it's important that the education gets out there and everyone's aware of these issues, and that we call a spade a spade. We realise what's happening in the halal meat industry, and don't misuse the terms tayyib. And don't forget that word tayyib is in the Quran. And when we say, well, we can do the halal bit, again, I'd refer you to the verse in the Quran that says, what is halal? Tell them what is halal is what is tayyib. You can't separate these two words. So what is halal is what is tayyib. But until we get there, compromise and pragmatism, obviously, we have to accept exists.
Thank you.
I totally agree. I mean, I also agree with you as well, that the best food is produced by Dr. Lutfi, and please order some meat from his farm. And I genuinely mean that. I mean, not only his farm, but any organic or free range. And one of the things that we've done recently, because of consumer demand, and it's consumer demand that's going to drive this, in my opinion. And we have had lots of people asking for free range and organic, and there are some HMC shops that do provide organic and free range based on the orders that they receive. So we do have that, you know, we're trying to support the businesses that are producing free range and organic. We need to work together. I think there will be a difference of opinion on stunning and non-stunning. That's fine, but I can live with it, and I think other people need to live with it as well. If people, you know, feel that they want to eat stunned meat and poultry and they feel that is fine, then go ahead. And if they don't feel that it's the right thing, then they have the option of buying from HMC certified shops. But I don't think we should make this into a huge issue, as HFA has mentioned, that becomes the be-all and end-all of halal. Halal is much more than that. And I'll just finish with a saying which I think is attributed to Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and if not, then one of the scholars. And when they used to eat at somebody's home, or they used to eat, then they used to say, and I'll just mention the saying in Arabic, وَقَدْ كَانَ السَّلَفُ يَتْرُكُونَ تِسْأَةَ عَشَارِ الْحَلَالِ خَشْيَةَ الْحَرَامِ. They used to leave 90% of halal in fear of haram. They not used to leave haram. They used to leave 90% of halal in fear of eating haram. وَكَانُوا يَقُولُونَ لِلْمَسْئُولِ عَنْهُمْ. And whenever somebody used to question them to say, why are you leaving, this is halal, they used to say, اتَّقِ اللَّهَ فِينَا. Fear Allah about us. Fear Allah for us. اتَّقِ اللَّهَ فِينَا. وَلَا تُطْعِمْنَا إِلَّا الْحَلَالِ. And do not feed us except that which is halal. فَإِنَّا نَصْبِرُ عَلَى الْجُوءِ وَلَا نَصْبِرُ عَلَى النَّارِ. Because we can bear hunger, but we cannot bear the fire. this is how the Salaf and the pious predecessors used to take the subject of halal within their lives. And I think for us, each and every one of us, we need to try and adopt that kind of caution when it comes to eating halal.
Yeah, to sum up, I have to agree with the two speakers. The fact that the consumer needs to be educated. We need to increase the education of consumers to understand the basics of halal food production. And as I said from the beginning, we should always desist from telling people something is haram when it's not. That's a big thing we should run away from. So educating the consumer, we will end up empowering the consumer to choose what he wants to eat, not what we are dictating to be halal or what we are dictating to be haram. We all know for a fact that it is allowed to eat kosher. We are allowed to eat kosher. We cannot deny that fact. We have to preach it to the consumer, though there are opinions. People say these days that the koshers of today's the Jews of today are different from the Jews at the time of the Prophet. But the fact is, the Prophet didn't say in 2,000 years' time you can stop eating kosher. So we have to send this message. Although that's the hard truth. That is the hard truth. We have to send the message out, and we have to also desist from declaring stunning as haram when it's not. The HMC doesn't say that. But people, if you go online, you see thousands of websites that say stunning is haram. You and I shouldn't say that if you are not sure. People call me in the office and say, oh, you guys are stunning animal, which is haram. I ask them, what is stunning? Or you electrocute animals. He doesn't have a clue of what stunning is, but he's arguing about stunning. So we need to educate ourselves before we can argue about things. So I think education is the way forward. And we have to learn. We are reluctant to learn as Muslims. We have to learn. Don't sit down for somebody to tell you what stunning is. Get on your books, know what stunning is. Wherever, if it means traveling to China to learn what stunning is, learn what it is before you argue about it. And well, that's it. So we have to learn. We have to learn. We are reluctant to learn, which is affecting us. We have to learn. So education. I think that's one big point we have to take home. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I hope the event's been useful. I hope people are gonna have a think about what halal and tayyib means to them. I know probably the person that will think about that most in this room is myself, because I have to constantly ask the question whether what we're doing is right, whether there's anything else that we could be doing better. I'd love to sit with Dr. Lutfi and see whether there's ways in which we can improve what we're currently doing. Unfortunately with organic, I'd love to do a range at some point, but the volumes that we supply at it just isn't able to be done through on organic purposes. But maybe there's a free range like that. And these are the conversations that we need to be having as a business all the time, because I make a promise to every single person that buys our product that it's halal and tayyib, and I need to make sure that I'm right in saying that. And I hope that we all kind of take that question with us home tonight and have it with our families, have it with our friends, and start to really think about who's giving us our food that we're eating, and who's actually promising us that what we're putting in our bodies is halal and is tayyib, and really start to ask the question of ourselves as to whether we're doing the right things in order to be able to go to sleep at night and know that we've done the right thing with regards to this. The cutting down on meat thing's a really important point. I know brothers in this room who wouldn't blink twice if we went to stakeout and ordered the biggest steak on the menu, plus wings, plus this, plus... I mean, we all do it, right? And I think we just need to start to look at that as a behaviour, but also look at food consumption in general. Like, it's shocking. I mean, the headlines today and yesterday have been about how the UK population, a lot of them are relying on food banks, but we throw away such a huge amount of food. I mean, our food consumption in general, as a consumerist population, is shocking. Having worked with the supermarkets, I know how bad it is and how much they throw away food every day. We all need to start asking questions about how we can improve that, what we can do to do better, in particular myself. So thank you very much for everyone on this panel. It's been really useful. Alhamdulillah.
A sincere thank you once again to the panellists for taking time out and coming. And I think initially we all kind of thought that this panel would be very diverse and there might be a lot of digression and sort of difference, but even though there was difference, which is natural, there was a lot of agreement about where we should be heading as an industry. So thank you once again.